which is different than chunking up. This is trying to relate it to bigger categories. Counterexample is just, can I find a time when somebody had one part of the belief and not the other? I mean, the belief is a relationship. This causes that. If I can find that this occurs without that, or that that occurs without, this occurs without that, then that's a counterexample. Okay? So, what I'd like to do is let's take a couple of beliefs, like, I care too much about people. Let's think. The organization one was.
So yeah, I was not organized
because you.
I wasn't not interested.
Not interested in it because.
Because I feel that by being organized
right.
in one here, that I will allow my mind to expand to create.
Okay, that being organized is a trade-off. So what I can do to chunk down is I can say, when you are creative, what parts are there when you're in being creative? How do you create things? So you kind of you organize them in such a way that they can begin to come in the right place. Do they have to come in the right place?
When they come in, I guess I do try them in different ways.
Okay. So one of the things I can do is to say, well, wait a minute, is when he talks about being creative, I can chunk down creativity into letting things come in, try them in different ways, finding the ones that work the best. Now guess what I can do? I can say, well, isn't that the same thing you do with organizing? You have to get the information in, you have to try it out in different ways and find the one that works the best. So if I chunk them down, they're both the same thing. So all you have to do is be a creative organizer. And in the same way that you organize your creativity. So that would be a way of chunking it down to actually say, well, if I chunk it into its smaller pieces, it's something that you're actually doing. If I take something like spelling, it's one of the things we do. I don't want you to spell the word. All I want you to do is see if you can make a picture of it in your mind. Can you do that? Yeah, I can make a picture of it in my mind. Can you read off the letters? Yeah. Well, that's not spelling. That's making a picture of it in your mind and reading off the letters. You've chunked it down into two elements that are not so difficult as spelling. If we chunk this up, where he said, well, I can't trade off, there's a trade-off between being creative and organizing. I would chunk organization up to something like, I could say, well, if your experience doesn't have a structure, how can you possibly function in the world? So what I'm doing is I'm taking the term organization and I'm chunking it up and saying, what is organization? In the biggest frame, it's structuring of experiences. Well, it doesn't have the same implications. So is it really such a trade-off to be able to find the most appropriate ways to structure your experiences? Yes. So again, you might want to check out your own responses to that. Let's take a bigger frame size. If I go to bigger frame size, I can say, well, if you don't learn to organize now, if you don't get that done now, then you might have too many pieces out there that are going to come back and get you in the future. So if you just keep letting it go into that disarray, then it might stop you from ever being able to be creative because you're going to be spending so much time picking up the pieces. Okay, so that's change frame size. I put it into a longer time frame. Or now the counterexample is fairly easy. I can say, was there ever a time that you were able to be organized and creative at the same time? So they don't necessarily go as a trade-off to each other. Is it possible for you to even be creative without being organized? Would you be creative if you couldn't organize the information after it came in? Could you?
No, I see what you mean.
Yeah. So first of all, the structure of what I'm doing is, what I'm wanting you to do is to be thinking about it from literally different perspectives. So I say, well, the kind of thing I was working on here is creativity means I can't be organized. There's a trade-off between the two. So what I can do is say, well, wait a minute, let me find an example that doesn't fit this belief. There have been times when you've probably been able to be creative and organized at the same time. In fact, I could say the most important, the people that are the biggest geniuses that I know are the ones that are the most organized about their creativity. So again, I can go to a counterexample that this is not necessarily so. Got to chunk our time down here. Let me take a minute. I want to find out how you're doing. Like I said, in doing the sleight of mouth, because these are categories and strategies that I personally think are really powerful and can open up a lot of things for you, I want to make sure that we spend the time for you to get a quality learning of them. Let me also find out, with all these various things that we've been doing so far, where are you at with them? Someone was saying, well, I kind of lost it around the chunk down, so on and so forth. What are the areas, if you kind of take a moment and look back at the whole day so far, where we've done redefining, we've done consequences, we've chunking down, chunking up, change of frame size, counterexample. Where are the clear spots and the foggy spots? It's all clear until I drew the pictures. Okay, good. That's easy.
It was real clear up until when we started talking about chunk down, chunk up.
Okay, so chunk down, chunk up. How about everybody else? Was it chunk down, chunk?
Clarity on consequences.
Consequences is something you'd like.
I'd like more on intention.
On intention. Okay. Let me ask you for this then. Here's what I'd like you to do tonight. Tomorrow morning, I'd like to come in and do just some demonstrations of taking beliefs. And what I'll do is, I know someone else brought up a very important issue where he said, well, in going over the examples, and I think this is very important for everybody, is said I kind of wasn't easy for me to put myself in the position of saying those things and feel like it was realistic to me. In other words, some of it seemed maybe too harsh. As it was like an identity thing. I don't know if I'd want to let that into my identity. And I do believe that these things can be done in a way that is very positive and validating, and it doesn't have to be. I mean, in a sense here, I'm not trying to challenge you and saying this thing isn't wrong. We're kind of, that this organization thing is wrong. We're kind of trying to come at it from different angles and say, well, what happens if you think of it this way? And open up some space in there. Also, as we begin to put them together in a format where you can sort of see, well, how do they function together organically as opposed to this pattern to this and that pattern to that, I think that that's going to be kind of important. So I'd like to ask you, if you would tonight, to think of what is some kind of a belief that you would like to see how this works with. And it could be a challenging belief. It could be one of your own. It could be one that you deal with that is a very common one that comes up all the time in your work. Another thing you can do is to maybe look at the newspapers. See if you can find beliefs or interesting things that are happening. Remember, I found a lot of this kind of stuff going on as the Ollie North trial. You know, Mr. North, didn't you act without integrity? I was only trying to save people's lives. Didn't act without integrity to protect people that needed protection. Well, were you trying to protect other people, or were you just trying to cover your own ass? Well, in other words, the reason that the thing was going on primarily in that, what would you call it? That it's not a trial, but in that inquiry, whatever, is sleight of mouth. If he could justify what he did, if he could put it in the right frame, it made him look good, and they were trying to make it look bad. They could chunk up. Well, Mr.